The Paris Agreement. There's been a lot of talk about it, positive, negative. Some of us don't even know what we're talking about at all. We'll be talking about the Paris Agreement coming up next, right here on The Parker J. Cole Show. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you can join me today for this special edition. We are going to be talking about a current event that is on the tip of everyone's tongue nowadays, and it's President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Now, some of you are out there wondering, what's the big deal about the Paris Agreement? If some of you are out there going, I can't believe he did that, or some of you are applauding his decision to pull out the Paris Agreement, we definitely want to hear from you today. We'll be talking about the Paris Agreement and other tangent topics with my guest co-host and contributor today, Bruce Schlink. He is the author of the book, Americans Held Hostages of the Environmental Movement, and we'll be talking about the Paris Agreement because that is one of the accords that is mentioned when we talk about climate change, energy policy, and things of that nature. And so if you want to weigh in on our topic, you certainly can by calling in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. Or if you hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, hashtag PJC Show with your questions and comments. We look forward to a vigorous discussion, so go ahead and call in again at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, friends. I'm Dr. Mike Spaulding, inviting you to listen to great Bible teaching on the Transforming Word radio show and podcast. All shows are available on iTunes and Stitcher. Search for the Transforming Word and subscribe for notification of new shows. You may also listen to every episode from my website, www.thetransformingword.com. In addition to the Transforming Word, I want to make you aware of my interview, news, and opinion show, Soaring Eagle Radio. If you're interested in engaging conversations related to a variety of topics not covered by typical news media, then check out Soaring Eagle Radio. You may subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher, and you may listen to every episode on my website, www.soaringeagleradio.com. For more information on my ministries, please email me, Pastor Mike at cclohio.com. Again, that's Pastor Mike at cclohio.com. Thank you for listening to these shows, and please leave me a note when you do. God bless you today.
Have you read the latest issue of SORMAG Digital, the award-winning literary magazine for multicultural readers and writers? SORMAG Digital is available quarterly and showcases interviews with the best authors in multicultural literature. SORMAG Digital features craft and business articles for those interested in writing. If you're looking for a good book, check out our book reviews on what's hot in multicultural literature. For writers looking for new readers to get in front of, SORMAG Digital is the perfect place to introduce your book. We offer advertising spaces that fit your promotional budget. Get your free subscription on SORMAG.com or order a print issue on MagCloud.com. If you would like more information about SORMAG Digital, check us out on SORMAG.com or contact us at SORMAG@yahoo.com. SORMAG Digital is the magazine for multicultural readers and writers.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to the Parker J. Cole Show right here on WPJC 104.5. Again, so glad you're here with me. We're going to be talking about the Paris Agreement, which is hot in the press right now. There are a lot of people talking about the president's decision to withdraw from it. But some of us may not really truly understand what it meant to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. Some of us are very hotly against it. Some of us are for it. Some of us don't even know where we should even stand on the issue. And so we want to definitely talk about the Paris Agreement as well as other tangent topics that relate to it. And we're going to talk about that with my guest co-host and contributor today, Bruce Schlink. Bruce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Parker. I'm glad to be on with you on your show today and talk about this topic that I think is very important for people to hear about.
I agree with you, and so I want people to reintroduce yourself to our listeners again. The last time you were on, we were talking about hostages of the environmental movement. And so I want you to reintroduce yourself again. Tell us a little more about your book and, everything that people need to know about you.
Well, I used to work for Consumers Energy for 25 years, and after I left that company, I decided to write this book because I felt the biggest thing that was important to me and everything is how detrimental the environmentalist movement is to job creation. And there are many areas in my book, especially in the oil industry, I talk about the benefit of the oil industry is to each state of the union and how many jobs are created, and also the millions and millions of dollars in revenue that comes into those states as a result of their relationship to the oil industry. And I talk about the RV industry because, of course, if gas prices are very high, it can cause layoffs in the RV industry, building RVs, because of how expensive those vehicles are. So I talk about that, and I also talk about the coal industry as well, which since President Trump has come into office, there's been 35,000 coal miners called back to work as a result of him changing the laws and withdrawing some of the executive decisions that President Obama had put in place concerning climate change and his environmentalist agenda.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I remember when I had Dr. Beisner from the Cornwall Alliance on the show, and he mentioned how when President Obama had and I can't think of the name of the order right now, but he instituted an order and it shut down many of the coal mining industries in some of the states. And these were states that have been coal miners for generations, many generations, and the impact of those coal miners and how it affected their families. And it was one of the reasons why so many people, when Trump came into office, elected Trump as president. And I remember how I never heard anything about it. No one talked about these things. But when I heard it from the Cornwall Alliance, you could understand why some people made the decisions that they made. And now we have another decision that is being made by President Trump to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And there are people who are praising the decision and those who are upset about the decision. There's some of us who have no idea what the decision really means. So that's why I want to talk about the Paris Agreement today so we can get some clarity as to what's going on with the Paris Agreement. So Bruce, go ahead and tell us in simple terms, what exactly is the Paris Agreement?
Well, the Paris Agreement was set up to take and reduce CO2 emissions. Now, a lot of times, if you ever watch or read any news stories, they always refer to as carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are not CO2 emissions. CO2 is plant life, food for plants, and carbon emissions is is pollution, but it's not the same thing. But you talk to environmentalists or you read articles about it, they always refer to it like it's the same thing. But you look at those stories and you can see that they always call it carbon emissions. Well, it's not the same thing. The thing is about removing CO2 from the atmosphere is if you removed every bit of it from the atmosphere, all plant life would die, and then we would follow suit because we eat the animals that eat plants, and it's a symbiotic relationship, and therefore we would all eventually die. So we need CO2. We actually need more CO2 than what we actually have right now. Did you know that nurseries that raise plants actually pump CO2 into their greenhouses to enhance the growth of their plants and make them more attractive to the buying public? Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah. So CO2 and everything, you stop and think about it, they're pumping this into these greenhouses, and you got people going into the greenhouses to look at these plants, to buy them and so forth, and they aren't feeling any ill effects from the enhanced levels of CO2 being in those greenhouses. You would think if it was dangerous, you wouldn't be able to allow human beings to go in where the plants are at. So that shows you right there that CO2 is not dangerous. I mean, when you drink a carbonated beverage like Pepsi, it's got CO2 in it, and you don't feel any ill effects from that either. But the thing is, right now, is that we've got, the nations that are developed nations like the United States, they have this $100 billion fund that's part of this Paris Climate Agreement, and they want the United States and other developed nations to pay into this fund. $100 billion. Now, some of the articles that I've read concerning that some nations, what they have actually started doing is that they have funds set up to help the developing countries of the world, with food and medicines and things like that. And what they're doing is robbing Peter to pay Paul. In other words, what they're doing in order to pay into the Paris Climate Green Fund, they're taking money away from the funds that they were using for giving food and medical resources to third world countries instead of actually giving additional monies into the Green Fund and keeping the level of aid as far as food and medicine at the same level. So actually, they're not really increasing their support to third world countries at all. They're just shifting funding from one resource to another, and therefore actually people end up suffering because maybe they aren't able to supply as much food to those third world countries and medicines to those third world countries. So it's detrimental from that standpoint in doing that.
We did get a comment from Dean from St. Paul, Minnesota, and Dean says this: when President Obama expressed his agreement with the Paris Climate Accord, he either failed to or deliberately chose not to present it to Congress for ratification. Since it is a treaty, congressional approval would have been necessary in order to make it legally binding upon the United States or on corporations within the U.S. This means that in the long run, Obama's decision to sign on to the accord was at best a recommended guideline for America. It was empty symbolism, virtue signaling to the radical environmental wing of Obama's base. Since it lacked the force of law, President Trump's decision to withdraw from it was equally an empty gesture. He, too, was merely seeking to throw some red meat to a faction or two of his own base, namely the environmental apocalypse and the free market advocates who view environmental alarmism as an attack on economic growth. Trump further muddied the waters, though, by suggesting that he was open to renegotiate the terms of the accord. Someone needs to take away his phone. He is his own worst enemy. Dean, thank you so much for your comment. Bruce, how would you respond to that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I agree with him on the point that it does seem like that simply withdrawing from it, it was an invalid agreement in the first place because Obama did not submit it to Congress and the Senate for approval because it is a treaty. He used executive orders. And we know that when President Trump came into office, he countermanded many of President Obama's executive orders on the first few days that he was in office. But to be sure that we are safe from being forced into adhering to this agreement, I think what he needs to do is one of two things. Either to submit it to the Senate for ratification, because there's a strong possibility that it will not get enough votes to become a treaty, or second of all, he could take and withdraw from the underlying treaty through the United Nations Framework Commission on Climate Change. If he does that, we could withdraw from that agreement within a year. If he doesn't do either one of these things, you could just simply say we're withdrawing from it, but it takes up to 4 years to actually get yourself out of the agreement, and there's always a possibility another 4 years that President Trump could run for president and wouldn't be elected, and we could have a Democrat get into office that would continue to have us stay in that agreement. I agree with the guy. I think that that it really shouldn't be binding on us at all. I think it was an illegal step by President Obama to sign on to that agreement in the first place. But to be sure that we are clear of this thing, I think Trump has to take either of these two steps, either submitting it to the Senate or withdrawing from the Framework Commission at the UN to make sure that we are totally free of being dragged into court by environmentalist groups here in the U.S. by them filing lawsuits against us for not following the agreement. And I think that's that would be the best thing for him to do in this situation.
And we're talking to Bruce Schlink. He is the author of the book, Americans Held Hostage of the Environmental Movement. It's available on Amazon.com, so go ahead and get your copy today. If you want to continue to weigh in on our topic, you certainly can by calling in at 646-668-8485, then press 1 to be live on air, or hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, hashtag PJC Show, with your questions and comments. You know, Bruce, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about the Paris Agreement and other initiatives that are about climate change, I really think that behind all of this, there are people who do have a sincere desire to protect the Earth, because we do know that this is the only planet, until we all get our Star Trek up to date with our actual science, we do want to protect our planet. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to protect the planet, wanting to make sure the planet is safe, because we should not abuse the home that God gave us. I totally feel that. But do you think that because there are other agendas underneath this sincere desire to make sure we are good stewards of our planet, do you think that is overwashing all the rhetoric that surrounds the whole environmental movement?
Well, like you were talking about earlier about as far as this agenda, I think the big thing is that it is to control every aspect of our lives. I mean, look at how destructive it has been, Obama's agenda on just the coal industry alone. I mean, there were many coal mines that closed up. There's a couple of companies that actually had to go into bankruptcy. They've come out. They filed Chapter 13, so they would be able to reorganize and stuff. But the one thing about it for sure is that the average coal miner makes between $70,000 and $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you imagine the devastation to a community by them shutting down their coal mine? If you have 100 employees that work in that mine and everything, you're talking about millions of dollars of economic activity being taken out of the economy of that city. And the coal miners are probably the highest paid people in that community. And so when they lose their jobs, the trickle-down effect on the whole community is devastating. And I think the whole thing, as far as globally speaking, as far as the leadership and everything, is that I think that the idea that we could be put in a position of being brought into the court at The Hague over environmental violations and everything is an awful thing. I mean, the European Union already does that, because all those countries, if they violate emission laws in their countries, they could be taken to the court at The Hague, and that's at the court outside of the jurisdiction of, say, for instance, England was violating some kind of pollution laws in their own country, they would be taken to an international court in Belgium over something that shouldn't be any of their business. I mean, it's all about each country should maintain its own sovereignty. That's one of the things that President Trump has really tried to drive home and everything, that a nation's sovereignty is very important, and to take and to yield to an international group through this Paris Agreement like that is very deadly for every country as far as their own national interests are concerned.
We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. When we come back, we'll be taking more of your questions and comments. Again, you can call in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. Or hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, hashtag PJC Show, with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. We'll be right back.
Let's get cooking. Yadi Cooks is a place where you will find recipe ideas, tutorials, and tips, clean eating, classic favorites, meal plans, nutrition information, and a lot more. You can find instructional videos or download recipes found on yadicooks.com. Follow my cooking chronicles on Instagram and Twitter. Get quarterly newsletters, latest updates on trending food culture at yadicooks.com. Let's get cooking.
Hi, I'm Sherry with the Lemonade Stand. As the weather warms, your risk of exposure to mosquito and tick-borne illnesses increases. Please keep these tips in mind when outdoors. Wear light-colored clothing, apply repellent, avoid high grassy areas, check yourself after returning, and remove any attached ticks promptly only with a tick removal device or tweezers, avoiding any home remedies. This has been a community service announcement courtesy of the Lion.
Jesus said, "Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely you received, freely give." Listen to our internet radio station at touchofgodradio.org, where you will find out your true identity in Christ. You can use the light that is within you to replace the darkness in this world. Go into all the world today with touchofgodradio.org.
Autism affects 1 in 68 children, sweeping all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. Autism is a lifelong brain disorder that leads to untold challenges to the physical, financial, and social well-being of people with autism and their families. Resources are stretched thin. The Autism Alliance of Michigan, a collective voice for families across the entire state, uses resources to help families battle challenges right here, right now. If you or anyone you know needs help navigating the autism journey, contact the Autism Alliance of Michigan today, 877-463-AAOM, or visit them online at aaomi.org.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to the Parker J. Cole Show right here on WPJC 104.5. So glad you're here with me. We're talking about the Paris Agreement, the ups, the downs, the positives and negatives. Your thoughts, we want to hear them. So feel free to call in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air, or hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, hashtag PJC Show with your question and comment. And Bruce, once again, thanks for being with us on the show to talk about the Paris Agreement. I'm enjoying the conversation because you're letting us know that there's just much more to this than climate change. There are agendas going on. There are people who are affected by the aggressive tactics and alarmists of the environmental movement, while still understanding that we do have to be good stewards of the earth as God called us to be. We did get another comment, Bruce, that I want to have you respond to. From Ricky from Beaverton, Oregon. Ricky, thank you for your comment. Ricky said, "What's done is done. Cheering it or complaining about it won't change anything. All we can ask ourselves now as individuals and families is, am I being a good steward of what God has given me? And for what it's worth, it wouldn't have changed anything since it had no teeth. It was basically the global equivalent of a pinky promise." Ricky, thank you so much for your comment. Bruce?
Well, it's true. The Paris Agreement had no teeth. I mean, it was all the cuts that the countries are supposed to make in their emissions is strictly voluntary. I mean, it's so funny for them to think that this was a great agreement. They were shaking each other's hands and high-fiving each other, saying how great this agreement was, but really it has no teeth as far as enforcement is concerned. Now, that's the thing that's so funny about it. You know, we were concerned about withdrawing from it, but yet they say it has no teeth. It's strictly voluntary, because every time the Kyoto protocols and stuff like that, there were so many countries who didn't want anything to do with that, and every agreement that they've come up with concerning, controlling pollution and everything, simply had so many countries who didn't want anything to do with it, because it always meant that it would cause financial damage to the country as far as economic growth is concerned. And we can clearly see that when Obama decided to sign on to this thing, it certainly had economic consequences for people in the coal industry. I mean, upwards of, I think, about 30 or 40,000 coal miners ended up losing their jobs as a result. And you see the reaction of this coal mining industry as far as by states who voted for Trump and who voted for Hillary, and that conversation that Hillary had with that coal miner, that he actually had tears in his eyes about the fact that she seemed to not care about that they were going to lose their jobs as a result. And this is the same kind of thing. That's why I emphasize job creation so much. It's so tied to energy production as far as jobs being created that it really concerns me when you start throwing people overboard like she was seeming so willing to do as far as coal miners are concerned by putting them out of a job. Coal is an energy source that we need in this country and around the world. I mean, China by far is building the biggest number of coal-fired power plants of any country, with probably India being next. And what they want to do is they want to raise their people out of poverty. And that's what you got to have. You got to be able to generate electricity in order to build, factories, to build automobiles or build computers or any other thing. I mean, we can't get by. I think, a lot of people talk about the invention of the car being one of the greatest inventions ever, but I think you think about electric motor. The electric motor is used in most everything. I mean, from blenders to air conditioning. We use electric motors for so many things. I mean, to go up in an elevator, to go down and up and down on an escalator. I mean, electric motors are really a key electrical device that we use. I mean, drill motors, saws, fans. I mean, you can think of probably half a dozen things in your house that probably use electric motors. And so in order to have electric motors, you got to have energy, and coal is part of the mix. The biggest problem with windmills and solar power is that they don't run all the time. I mean, the Netherlands may have used wind power to take and dry their land because they were below sea level when they had flooding and stuff, but I bet you nowadays those things are just strictly used as tourist attractions. I'm sure they're probably using gas and electric motors if they ever have any kind of flooding problems in their country now. They would never rely on wind power for getting rid of a flooding condition nowadays because they can't count on it when they might need it the most. And so it's just a terrible thing that they can do away with using electricity that comes from coal or natural gas or nuclear power.
I like how you mentioned about how the coal industry was hugely affected by the measures of the environmentalist movement, and how some of those people felt as if they were just being tossed to the side and they were being demonized. And that was something, like I said earlier in the broadcast, I never knew. I never knew there was a huge problem with it. At first, you hear the word climate change and you think, oh, we got to do something to save the planet. That's typically the thoughts that may come in someone's mind. And then when I first started talking to Dr. Beisner at the Cornwall Alliance, he mentioned the poor. And I remember for the first time ever, I had never heard the poor mentioned in all of this talk about environmentalism. And so what I want to do, Bruce, is read a quick, some selected lines from the press release that we received from Cornwall Alliance. And it's basically titled, Cornwall Alliance Celebrates Withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. And then it says, President Donald Trump today, which was June 1st, announced his decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. Not only Americans, but people all over the world should celebrate, says Dr. Beisner. He goes on to further say that, but it's the right decision, Dr. Beisner said. It's right because, as former NASA scientist and leading climate alarmist Dr. James Hansen put it, the Paris Agreement is a fraud, really a fake, just worthless words. Why would someone like Hansen say that? Because even assuming climate alarmists are right and human emissions of carbon dioxide are driving dangerous global warming, full implementation of the Paris Agreement throughout the century would be no help to the environment or to the people. Instead, it will be harmful to both. And so when you hear words like that, Bruce, when you hear the Cornwall Alliance say that even if they had implemented this Paris Agreement to the T, let's say they're going to do it to the T, it would not have helped. Why are so many people, do you think, still upset that President Trump decided to withdraw from it?
Well, I think unfortunately it's more about controlling people's lives. Unfortunately, I think that they want to be able to decide, how much energy you can use. I mean, people have smart meters on their homes now, so they can actually know how much energy you're using at any one time and what time of day you're using and so forth. I guess from what I understand that some of these smart meters can even talk to some of the newer appliances. The newer appliances have receivers and transmitters in them to be able to communicate back and forth. To what end, I don't know why they would need anything like that. I mean, if you need a refrigerator, why would it need to communicate with the electric meter? Because you use a refrigerator 24/7. Air conditioning, there might be some purpose to that in some respects. I know some people have interruptible services. They'll have their air conditioning on a separate meter on their house from the rest of the house as far as lights and stove and things like that, so that that if there's a high demand for electricity, they can interrupt the power going to your air conditioning because of peak demand and so forth. But the other thing about it is, and I don't know if you heard about what happened in southern Australia, but they have had 2 blackouts in that part of the country due to the fact that they have a high concentration of wind power.
Oh.
And therefore they had one plant there that is in the business of melting steel and iron ore and stuff like that, and they were actually knocked offline and everything. And what ended up happening is they had molten steel and one of those big ladle type things that they use for dumping steel into molds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
While the power shut down here, they couldn't dump the steel, and it ended up hardening in there, and they had to take and jackhammer it out of this ladle that they use for dumping steel into molds because the power grid went down because there was a big, huge dive in power creation by wind power, and they didn't have enough coal-fired generation backup, because what they've been doing is they've been shutting down coal plants in southern Australia because they aren't able to make money with the coal-fired power plants because of the subsidies that they're giving to wind power.
Okay.
So what's happening is that you have an intermittent power source that can't be used all the time, and you got coal plants that aren't able to make a profit. So the utility companies say, well, we can't afford to keep these plants open. So what they've actually started doing now is that they're starting to pass legislation there to take and subsidize coal-fired generation in order to keep them on standby when the power from wind dies out.
Okay. Okay.
Isn't that
So it's kind of like
crazy?
going back to what you were doing initially. It's just using the same power that worked for a while. So let me ask you this, and I've heard this question from other people when we talk about energy policies and climate change. I've heard people say, well, we just have to get our alternative sources of energy set right. We know that we've just got to figure out a way to collect wind power and keep it sustainable. We have to get a way to collect the solar energy and keep it sustainable. So when you hear things like that, how would you respond to that? Because I know I was one of the questions that was posed to me a while ago, and I wasn't quite sure how to answer it. So how would you answer that?
Well, the big thing is that, they talk about using batteries to store the power from solar so they could be used at night. But it would require massive battery farms in order to do that. And I don't know, as far as there being a battery out there that could go overnight, that they could store enough power that would last throughout the night till the next day when the sun comes up or not. And the thing is, that gets me about it is that, the expense of setting up solar panels or wind farms in the acreage that it takes to generate any kind of measurable amount of electricity is tens of thousands of acres, and then you're going to need tens of thousands of acres to have these batteries to store the energy when the sun's not out and so forth. That I think it's just impractical that you could rely upon that as a backup for wind and solar power when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't out. I mean, all of us know that our phones sometimes let us down in the middle of a conversation at a very inconvenient time, and our laptop computers the same way. I don't think that wind and solar will ever be practical power sources. The only way to really go is hopefully maybe someday we'll be able to have fusion power plants. But right now, if we wanted to have a CO2 clean energy, nuclear energy is the only one out there, but you got environmentalists that are against that simply because of the fact that nuclear is connected to making bombs and stuff like that, and of course they're worried about getting rid of the waste. The thing that gets me about that argument is that we are exposed to radiation our entire lives, both from the sun and from the ground. You've probably heard of radon gas.
Yeah.
You see ads on TV and everything, having your house checked for radon. Well, the thing is, radon is coming up out of the ground, and you're exposed to it every day of your life. I guess the idea behind it being in your house is that it supposedly is more concentrated than if you're outside because it's able to accumulate inside the house because you got no wind to blow it away, as opposed to when you're outside. But you are exposed to radon gas every day of your life. One of the other things I talk about, people get all bent out of shape of being worried about asbestos. 98% of the United States has asbestos rock somewhere in its locality. 98% of America. We use, of course, asbestos to make brake lines for our cars and so forth. People think the Earth is a pristine place, but it really isn't as pristine as we make it seem. It's just that, when a tree falls and dies and everything, all it is converted from one energy source into another. I mean, it dies and it decays and it gets buried under the ground, and eventually it becomes oil or it becomes coal. The same thing goes on with everything in life and everything. They try to make it seem like that, that the Earth is a pristine place, but volcanoes are erupting all the time, and they're spewing out tons of pollution many more times than what any industrial complex in China or anywhere else in the world can. And that's why this whole thing, the idea that the Earth is a pristine place, is not really a true statement. Right. It's just like when we bury our garbage in a landfill, it turns into methane gas when it's decaying and so forth. And in some places, they've actually harnessed that gas that generate electricity, which is not a bad idea. But the idea that the Earth is pristine and everything is really not true. And the idea that God made this planet and everything, and that man has polluted it and so forth, is not really true. God has set up chemical reactions to take place to make minerals and so forth for our use. And some of that requires that something dies and decays. I mean, it's just like they go on about the dinosaurs, turning into oil over time. I'm not entirely sure that it's all coming from dinosaurs. And I know I've read some articles about where the Shell Oil Company did a microscopic analysis of oil and found out that it was actually made of algae. Algae that had died converted into oil. That's crazy, huh? I mean, they're actually experimenting now, and some oil companies are experimenting, trying to raise algae and convert it directly into gasoline. Did you know that?
I didn't. And see, that's the thing about this whole topic, is that there's a lot of things out there that people aren't picking up on because they're only going to show one side of it. There's only going to be shown one side of it. I remember, and that's how me and you connected when we started talking about this stuff, was with the Cornwall Alliance, and I had heard things I had never heard before. And so that's why I'm glad you're bringing up some of these tangent topics in regard to the Paris Agreement, because these are other areas of implication that comes up, And I like how you said, too, there's a philosophical reasoning behind it, thinking that the Earth is pristine and clean. And we have to realize, like one guest on my show said some time ago, that nature is not perfect, nor is nature pure. And once we understand that we do have a duty to keep it, keep our Earth. We should not destroy the Earth because of greed. We should not destroy the Earth because we're trying to just make money. We shouldn't do that. But there is a philosophical reasoning behind that. It's thinking that if man is this huge disease that is destroying a pristine Earth, where Earth is not pure or perfect. And I think that's an interesting point that you brought out there. When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking to Bruce about an article that says Trump's climate withdrawal is an impeachable offense. And I want to get your ideas about that. So if you want to weigh in on our topic, you certainly can by calling in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. Or you can hit me on Twitter at ParkerDeco/PJC show with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Are you a reader looking for more compelling Christian fiction? Maybe something a little more edgy or a bit more real? Are you tired of most Christian fiction shying away from the truth and settling for a rose-tinted view of the world and its issues? Or are you an author who has a compelling story to tell, but you're afraid it doesn't jive with today's brand of Christian or secular fiction? Are you tired of Christian publishers telling you that your content is too edgy? Or maybe you've tried submitting your content under the radar to secular publishers only to be told your themes are a bit too religious. We invite you to take a look at the Crossover Alliance. We are an online publishing company that specializes in edgy Christian speculative fiction with Christian themes and real-world content. Our company is formed from authors and readers just like you who are breaking into the mainstream and Christian markets with this compelling genre. Head over to the www.thecrossoveralliance.com for all the details on who we are, what we do, and what we accept. Right now, if you sign up for our email newsletter, you'll receive a free digital copy of our first short story anthology. Check us out today and help us spread the word about the Crossover Alliance, where light shines brighter in the darkness.
Has God called you to be a pastor or leader, but the men and women in your church won't let you speak because you're a female? Is the call to minister strong on your life, but you hesitate because you think the Bible tells women to be silent in the church? I'm Jory Micah, and I am here to tell you, sister, that together we can break the glass steeple. I fight and advocate for gender equality in the church, and there are others with me who are holding up the banner. Subscribe to my blog at JoryMicah.com for interviews, commentary, and uplifting words to give you the motivation to answer the call to ministry. Together, we can break the glass steeple and inspire all of God's children, men and women alike, to answer the call to ministry.
Question: if you write a book, everybody will rush out to buy it. Obvious answer: no. If you were a celebrity or if you had a huge marketing budget, then maybe you can get a lot of exposure for your book. Another solution would be to check out joeytweets.com. joeytweets.com is a promotion and marketing service with access to over 1/3 of a million followers on Twitter. joeytweets.com has 3 packages available to fit any budget. That's JoeyTweets.com. joeytweets.com. Get some serious exposure for your books.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to the Parker J. Cole Show right here on WPJC 104.5. So glad you're here with me. We're talking about the Paris Agreement and so many other topics that are in tangent with the Paris Agreement. As you know, on June 1st, President Trump decided made an announcement to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Agreement. And we've been talking about what the Paris Agreement was, what it meant for our country, how it affected other parts of the environmentalism movement, and other things that relate to this topic. So looking forward to your questions and comments. You can call in at 646-668-8485 and press 1 to be live on air. Or you can hit me on Twitter, like I said, Parker J. Cole, #PJC Show, with your questions and comments. Bruce is our guest co-host and contributor today. He is the author of the book, Americans Held Hostages of the Environmental Movement. It's available on Amazon.com. So go ahead and get a copy of this book, and you'll enjoy all the original research and information that Bruce has done on this topic. He's very knowledgeable about it. One thing, Bruce, that you mentioned throughout the broadcast was the effect that this decision with the clean alternatives being initiated by the past administration and what's going on right now with the Trump administration. And so you have shared an article with me called Trump's Climate Withdrawal is an Impeachable Offense. And so one of the comments that the article makes is that when he withdrew from the U.S., when he withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement, he did so with 22 Republican senators who collectively received $10 billion in contribution from the coal and oil industries. And so my question would be, do you believe that it is an impeachable offense that with the president withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, that was an impeachable offense? What do you think?
No, it's not an impeachable offense. I mean, this has nothing to do with breaking a law that he's obligated to or anything like that. I mean, they made it sound like it's like a war crimes act against the world. I mean, that it's going to cause millions of people to die because of pollution and stuff like that. I mean, as far as I can see, the left has really been grasping at straws. I mean, it seems like every day he should be impeached for this and that and the other. I mean, it just seems like that, they're so visceral against him and so forth that they're grasping at straws to find a reason to impeach him. As far as these senators getting money from the coal and oil industry, I don't know if you know who Tom Steyer is, but he's an environmentalist that has given millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton's campaign and probably many other Democrats that support, the global warming agenda and all those programs related to it. So, I mean, they always tie it to that, they're in the pocket of one group or the other. It's the Republicans that are in the pocket of the oil companies. Well, you could say the same thing about the Democrats being in the pocket of the environmental organizations out there.
Pick your poison. I think
so it's really, gosh, it's just such a nonsense to use that. I mean, that's what they do. They try to use that particular thing. It's saying that, demonizing them by saying that they got money from the oil industry. Well, the same thing goes for the Democrats. They get money from the environmental groups, so we demonize them for doing that too.
Yeah.
It's too bad campaigns cost so much money, but you got to raise money in order to run for office, unfortunately, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be in the pockets of those industries as a result of that.
I was looking at the article as we were talking, and one of the things that they show a petition of, and it says, "Stop Trump from reopening America's coast to oil and gas drilling." And they show a oil-soaked, looks like a swan or something, an oil-soaked swan from an oil spill. Now, there are people who say, Bruce, you're talking about how the coal industry was affected by this and that, but what about these oil spills that have happened? What about that? So what would be your response to that?
Well, unfortunately, like anything, accidents will happen. I mean, let's say, they want to condemn the oil industry because this swan gets killed and everything, but there's been numerous articles about the fact that windmills are killing birds, especially raptors, by the thousands because they're running, they're flying around in those wind farms and they're getting hit by the blades. Even if you go on my Facebook or Twitter page, you have to go back quite a ways down it. But I posted a video of a bird that was flying around this wind turbine and everything, and he got hit by it, and it's showing him spiraling into the ground. So,
oh my goodness!
They always, the thing is, it gets me. President Obama gave a pass. He passed some kind of legislation or law and everything to allow the wind industry to kill birds that are protected species, like most birds are, like the American eagle, are protected species, to allow them to kill those birds without having to pay any kind of fines for doing so. I mean, there's this solar farm out in Nevada, and what it is they got these mirrors in a circle pointing up at this tower and everything, and it heats the water, this salt water. It's circulating through this pump. It actually runs a generator, and what's happening is there's actually been birds flying into that and getting incinerated.
Oh my goodness!
By the heat generated by those mirrors. I mean, it's like you taking a magnifying glass and how you focus it down on a sheet of paper into a narrow beam, and it sets the paper on fire. Well, that's exactly what's happening to birds. And there's a video of that online of these birds flying in here, and they are getting incinerated by this so-called green, clean, environmentally friendly solar farm. So they can go on about, oil spills killing birds or dolphins and stuff like that, but the same thing is going on in the green industry. They got windmills and solar farms that are killing birds as well. And just recently, just within the last couple of days, I read an article that they believe that these offshore wind farms are killing whales. And how that's happening is that whales use sonar just like dolphins do, echolocation. And remember before when I was on your show, we talked about the infrasound that was affecting people and keeping them from sleeping at night? Well, they think that sound is reverberating through the water, and it's causing the echolocation of these whales to be thrown off, and they're beaching themselves. I don't know if that's true or not, because there have been incidences in the past of whales beaching themselves, and I don't know if it had anything to do with wind farms or not, but it's certainly a possibility that it could be, because there are problems with those things causing infrasound that are affecting people's sleep patterns. And a lot of people have had to move away from their homes as a result of that, so it's entirely possible that wind farms offshore are killing whales. Now, another thing that they are talking about, the fact, too, is that when you're taking and building these wind farms offshore, you have to drive pilings into the seabed in order to support that structure. So there's a lot of noise associated with doing that as well. So they talk about that can cause fish a lot of headaches because of that pounding of driving pilings into the seabed to support these structures as well. So
that can also have.
They go on about how green it is. It isn't very green as far as protecting the animals and so forth at all. You know.
Well, Bruce, let me interrupt you real quick. Let me interrupt. You got a caller calling in. Caller, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Did you have a question or comment for our guest?
Yes. The question I have is, well, I know that there's always a lot of new technology comes out with trying to be off the grid or do whatever, but there's always a hard time doing balance between nature and technology. But if we don't create ways to use other resources to create new power supply, because eventually the oil's going to run out, gas is going to run out. We try to find all the ways to make it, but there's never going to be an equal balance between technology and the way of living. We can try to find new ways to do it, but I don't know how that's going to be better or worse for the.
Hey, Bruce, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I disagree with him on the point that I think we're ever going to run out of oil. I think that the Earth is a giant chemical factory. We know that we have volcanic activity going on in the Earth, and we know that we can melt iron ore and mix it with other different elements and create different types of steel and different strengths of steel. And I think that the Earth, being that there's volcanic activity, there's chemical reactions going on in the ground. And just like I talked to you earlier about the fact that when we put our garbage in a landfill, that decaying food scraps and so forth turns into methane gas. So right there, it shows right there that there are chemical reactions going on making methane gas, and there's chemical reactions going on in the ground that will continue to make oil. I know that there's been stories about peak oil and that we're going to run out of oil, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Right now, the United States has gone from being an importer of oil to an exporter of oil. Now, initially, part of the reason why we weren't exporting oil is that after the oil embargo back in the 70s, the Congress passed laws not allowing the United States to export oil. But since fracking came into being, we are finding oil and natural gas that we would not have access to before, because the technology, as he was talking about, technology has created the opportunities to be able to extract oil and natural gas that we weren't able to access before. And we are now exporting oil because the laws have been changed since President Trump came into office, and we are exporting natural gas to Asia and Europe now as a result of fracking. So I don't think we're ever going to run out. It's just going to, it'll run out in one place, but we'll move to another part of the globe and we'll find oil somewhere else. And I'm glad to hear, and this is something I talk about in the book, I talk about Anwar up in Alaska. President Trump in the last few weeks has talked about going to Congress and having that area opened up that's been fought over for the last 40 or 50 years about drilling up there. Republicans have been in favor of drilling there. Democrats have always been against it, and of course environmentalists are up in arms about the idea of drilling up there, but that area should be opened up so that it gives economic opportunity to the Eskimos and the people of Alaska up there to be able to get good paying jobs up there, because like I said, I have that one chapter in the book where I show how the trickle-down effect goes throughout all the states of the Union. You know, even Hawaii benefits from the Alaskan pipeline that we built in the 70s, that they were involved in that. I mean, even being as remote as Hawaii is to Alaska, you wouldn't think, well, where would they be getting economic benefit? Well, they actually had jobs produced even in Hawaii as a result of building the Alaskan pipeline. And I think if they drill up there in Anwar, that's going to be a huge job creator. I mean, there were 70,000 people working on that Alaskan pipeline back in the 70s. 70,000 people. That's a lot of jobs.
And I think you make a good point there, too, Bruce, about just job creation, because one of the things that Cornwall Alliance says is you educate people, and when you educate people, people tend to create their own wealth because they have education to back that up, you know. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. Caller, did you want to respond to Bruce's comment, or did you have any other questions to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I want to respond to that. Okay, like, the one thing is, like, Alaska is a big country that has been explored, but it's a very beautiful country, okay? But if you say it great benefits, why don't they just make cities in Africa? Why don't they reduce the population of animals in Africa? They don't want to wild animals like lions and exotic animals in Africa. Why don't they start building cities in Africa then? There's a whole bunch of oil in Africa, but they don't bother building stuff in there. Why?
Well, probably, you know, it's like, you know, they're a third world country and they haven't really fully developed their potential yet. I think over time, and I mean, there are areas in Africa where oil is being produced, but it's a very small percentage, and they're probably more known for diamond industry more than they are probably known for oil. And of course, it does matter the type of ground that's underneath. You know, what kind of elements and materials and products and minerals are going to be developed in those areas. It has a lot to do with what's the mix of that soil and so forth. That's going to determine that. I have no doubt in everything that. Go ahead.
Yeah, but no, just what I'm saying is, the one thing is like, the U.S. can easily do profit sharing with Africa. They can easily bring equipment over there and do whatever, but the U.S. government doesn't go over there because it's a natural animal preserve. It's basically, most of it's an animal preserve, and they don't go tearing it up. I mean, Alaska is an animal preserve. It's like almost a national forest, and that's being protected. There's a lot of animals over there that are not being damaged. If you start bringing over equipment and stuff like that, you're going to affect the environment. Especially when you dig for oil, it's going to create a toxic thing because your oil all buried in. When you first hit oil, it's going to hit a lot of toxic oil is going to come out. And it's going to pollute a lot of the water and a lot of stuff like that. And that's why it's not going to be touched. And plus the U.S. uses about 10 times more oil than most countries ever used in life. I mean, U.S. consumes so much oil that's ridiculous. I mean, China, like, is the most dirtiest country in the world, and they use weird chemicals, and their air is so polluted that usually you have to look at some broadcasts and find out if it's safe to go outside because the pollution's so high because it's yellow smog. I mean, if you keep on digging for resources, you're going to end up polluting the environment, and that's going to be hard to reconcile or hard to fix. So, I mean, Trump is want to pull out of this bargo because he thinks this is a waste of money. He's a businessman. It's like if you have billions and billions of dollars something just to change the climate by 2 degrees in 20 years. I mean, it's not going to do much. I mean, he just announced that this is not a different subject, but the flight control system in airports demonetized the U.S. for so long that the U.S. was trying to make money out, but our air system sucks. But most countries are privatized, and they handle about 10 more times more traffic than we do. So, I mean, why can't we just, slowly evolve with better technology? There's technology out there that's pretty advanced, but it's getting choked or shelved by a lot of these companies. There's one guy who invented a car that runs out water, and he got poisoned because his thing works. But we're never going to see that technology. I mean, there's technology that can turn a house off the grid, but you got to be kind of rich to use it. But there's technology out there that will reduce the strain on the power system. I mean, our power grid sucks, and it hasn't been updated in 50-some years, and it's willing to collapse at any time. Like that one power grid failure when that squirrel, whatever, hit some fuse thing or whatever, and it basically stayed in Michigan, and half the western coast went out of power for about 2 weeks. I mean, our system just sucks. Need better system.
Well, caller, thank you for. I'm going to interrupt really quick. Caller, thank you for inviting our conversation. We are really quite out of time, so I'm going to have to put you on hold. But I want Bruce to respond to that. But caller, thank you so much for calling in. Bruce, go ahead and respond to that, would you?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to address in there, he was going into the area and everything, like Trump being a businessman and sort of criticizing that. It's like the corporation makes all the money, but there's people working for the corporation, thousands of people in some cases, depending on the company, that are benefiting from that corporation investing in whatever product they decide to sell. They always make it seem like that it's the corporation, that there's nobody else benefiting but the big fat cats at the top of the heap, and that's so wrong. I mean, I think the Shell or BP employs about 50,000 people worldwide. I mean, that's a lot of people, and they're not all executives. Mm-hmm. Their executive board probably only composes of probably 12 to 20 people. The rest of it, is, of course, office staff and stuff like that. But, there's plenty of blue-collar workers that benefit from what Donald Trump's wanting to do for the country. I mean, that's why he repealed a lot of the laws concerning the coal industry that he did, because he wanted to put the blue-collar worker that works in the mine. I mean, he even did a video presentation for a brand-new coal mine that opened in West Virginia just this last week. And he saw the benefit to the blue-collar worker. He wasn't thinking about the executive fat cats at the top of the heap. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times the news media demonize and say, it's the corporate fat cats, that are benefiting. Well, it's not just them it's benefiting. It's the average Joe on the street that's benefiting from it as well. As far as, what he was going on about displacing animals, human beings only occupy 3% of the earth. Nature has all the rest of it. So there's plenty of room for the animal life, even though they may be displaced out of 4 or 5 acres to drill an oil well. It's not going to affect them very much at all. I mean, they're very compliant in that respect, and it's like I say, nature has the biggest part of the globe to occupy and to live out their lives on. Mankind is just a speck on the earth as far as that's concerned.
Well, Bruce, I appreciate you being with us on the show. We did have another comment, but we are out of time, so I can't read it. But thank you so much for being with me on the show. Thank our caller for calling in. Really has some great insight, because this is the type of thing that I like to do. I love to have that open discussion, whether people disagree or disagree. If we don't talk about it, then how do we know what things are true, what things are right, if something's wrong, if we can clarify information? And so I really appreciate the conversation our caller brought in and brought us a lot of discussion to the comment, as well as you, Bruce, helping us to understand something. Because as soon as you said about the blue-collar worker, I was remembering the video that Cornwall Alliance had shared. They show all these regular blue-collar workers who were all out of work. They had lost their houses and their families, and how they said it's like no one cared. I mean, they said no one cared. And I was thinking, what if a major government decision had affected your industry, whatever you are, to our listeners out there? It had affected your industry, and they said, well, I don't care. As long as we save the planet, I don't care. And you look at, but what about me? I'm part of the planet. Don't I matter? And so I'm really glad that you brought that up when you mentioned that. So thank you again, Bruce, for being with us on the show. If people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. Just type in my name, Bruce Schlink. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Bruce, all lowercase, _ Schlink, all lowercase. So that's the two places you can find me. And, of course, you can find my book. You can read some of my book on Google Books. They'll allow you to read up to half of it on Google Books, so you can get up to about page 253 of my book if you want to read it there, or you can go to Amazon Books and buy it, or Rose Dog Books is the publishing company that made the book. So thank you for having me on your show today. I appreciate it very much.
And I appreciate you being with me, Bruce. Can't wait to have you back real soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
We were talking today to Bruce Schlink. We were talking about the Paris Agreement. For those of you who interact in our conversation, once again, thank you so much for doing so. It's a current event, lots of debate and topic on. I'm so glad that Bruce is here with us to present us with information that you may not have known. And for those of you who still disagree, guess what? It is okay. We can disagree in love and respect. Just so glad that we were able to have the conversation. Thank you for joining me for this edition of the Parker J. Cole Show. Don't forget to join me on Tuesdays for The Right Stuff, where I showcase Christian authors worldwide. You have a wonderful, absolutely glorious, blessed day.
Make your mattress totally you during the Labor Day sale, now at Value City Furniture. Shop the latest mattress styles from Serta and Beauty Rest, and take a simple rest test with one of our certified sleep experts to find your perfect mattress. Plus, this week at Value City Furniture, save up to $400 off select mattresses. Plus, free box springs, pillows, and more with qualifying purchases. And free delivery plus 36 months no-interest financing with your Value Plus credit card on mattress purchases $9.99 and up. Only at Value City Furniture. Financing subject to credit approval. See store for details.